Well, hey there, this is Amanda. I am going to record a tutorial video for you to show you some of my raw processing. So these are the newly edited bokeh overlays for 2019. I've actually gone through and edited all of these and weeded out some that were duplicates and just had some fun playing with them. But there was something that I noticed that I did to every single bokeh overlay that I came across. So I'm going to go through some of these and show you some of the things that I did in raw processing. So let me go ahead, let me see if this one might be a good one to start with. I am going to go into my history panel. So I'm going to go D for develop. And then in my history panel, you can see here kind of what I did. But one thing that I almost always do is, and you can see here's the original, and you can see I always move the shadows and the highlights for sure. And then this is the edited final one. So let me show you a little bit about how this works. So I'm in Lightroom, obviously. I'll show you ACR in a little bit, Adobe Camera Raw, but this is kind of how it came in. You can see a little bit of a bright spot here. If I turn on this, on the histogram, see this little triangle? If I click on that and it's outlined in white, it'll show me where I've blown my highlights. Not a major deal, I guess, especially since we're using this as an overlay in screen mode, but I probably want to bring that down. So I can bring my highlights down a little bit. It'll bring down all of them. Let's just say it makes the rest of them a little too dark. Then I can just go ahead and use a brush. So if I click on my adjustment brush here, and it says there as well, but the shortcut is K. And then I double click effect. It'll reset everything back to 0. If you don't do that, it's going to remember the settings of your last brush. So let's just say I want to brush off some of those highlights that are a little too bright. So you can see my brush here. I'm going to use my left bracket key to make that a little smaller. And then I'll go to highlights and just kind of, ooh, that's too much. See how it did that? We don't want that. So I'm going to go over here and kind of brighten that up a little bit. So that's pretty good. I can kind of do that. And again, maybe brighten that up, back up a little bit. So you can see kind of before and after. I hit the Y key. I do that often. I'll hit the Y key to see the before and after side by side. Usually you're not going to want to mess with exposure. You could add a little bit of contrast. Contrast is going to deepen the blacks and brighten the highlights and the whites. So you could do that. You don't really have to. I almost always take the shadows down with overlays. And because we're using screen mode in Photoshop to place these, you want as much black as possible if it's not the parts of your image that you want to show through. So for example, this area here, it's kind of like a white blob. You're not going to want that in your overlay. Now you could always take care of this in Photoshop if you want to, or you could take a brush, because as you saw, I moved the shadows all the way down. I could even take these blacks and move them all the way down. Now, when I did that, I got rid of most of the blob. However, what did you notice about, if you did, notice about the color or maybe the saturation of some of our snowflakes? It got a little bit weird, a little bit orangey for me, so I'll probably take my saturation down a little bit. And these are snowflakes. I want them to be more white than I want them to be really like warm and yellow. That looks weird to me. They say beware of the yellow snow. So I don't want them blue either, although I kind of actually like how that looks, to be honest with you. I was going to go for more of like a true white, but I can move that down. That totally desaturates the image. I don't know that I want to do that, but I'll stay about here. You can also play with your temp and tit sliders. Again, we don't want to go too yellow, and you saw how my highlights got blown there. So if I can go ahead and turn that off, or too blue. That is kind of interesting, although with screen mode, I'm not sure that we want a lot of that blue coming through. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to knock down the temperature just a little bit. And that's probably what I would do with this one. You could add some texture and clarity. And you can kind of see what that does. Let me turn off my highlights there. Yeah, it kind of makes some of the darker areas pop out a little bit. I usually don't bother with these because I do raw processing very quickly. With clarity, that brings back everything. So I would just leave these guys the same. I definitely have used the dehaze slider, especially it might get rid of some of these weird hazy spots. So I can do that. Actually, the dehaze slider, it's just another way of adding contrast to the image. So you could totally do that as well. And that's pretty much what I would do. If you're trying to change the colors in the image, you could use your HSL panel. With this case, I don't really need to. For some of the images, you can turn the the whites more pink colored. Or you can even do that here under your split toning. So my highlights, I could go in here and pick maybe a red color. So there's so many different things that you can do, and that'll kind of show through as well. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to go ahead and turn that off by doing that. This little guy here turns it on and off. I'm just kind of looking at my panel and telling you what I would do. I'm not going to worry about sharpening. You could bump that up if you want to, but I would hit my Option key and make sure that my masking was at 100. That way you're not getting a lot of noise into these shadowed areas. You could add luminance. Again, I would not. If you saw what I did with this image originally, all I messed with were the shadows, the blacks, and then I used an adjustment brush to get rid of some of these little weird artifacts. That's all I did. I'm just gonna kind of show you. If you notice any chromatic aberration, you can certainly check that box. I don't notice it, and I don't think you would notice it in the overlay. I could also crop this as well. So if there's a lot of dead space that I don't think I would use, I can always hit R for crop, which is so weird, y'all. I have looked so many ways to try to change that R shortcut to a C, and I have not been successful. So I could do something like that and crop out the weird areas that I don't want, if I wanted to. And then lastly, like I said, I could use my adjustment brush, which is K. I'm gonna double click Effect to zero everything out. And then what I would probably do to get rid of these weird artifacts is maybe do something like drop the exposure down all the way, for example, and then just start going in here and just getting rid. Anytime I see like a weird little blob, I can kind of just go in here and dab around a little bit. And I don't do a lot of adjustment brush work in, it's funny, on my screen, I'm seeing these white dots, but it's actually just my screen is dirty. I don't use my adjustment brush much in Lightroom. I do all of that in Photoshop, so forgive me. That's a little weird. Yeah, so you could do something like that. Or if any of them looked kind of bizarre that you want to get rid of, like this is kind of bizarre, you can just get rid of that guy. So there you go. So you could totally do something like that. And then this would be a perfect overlay. You have a very bright spots where you're going to want that to show through on a screen blend mode, and then the rest is totally black, and that will go away in screen blend mode. So let's see what I did. And I think it's gotten rid of my previous ones, but I'm totally happy with this. I think this is totally fine. I'm going to leave it as is. I'm going to hit G for grid to go back here. What else do I want to show you? That's pretty much what I did on almost every image. Sometimes I rotated them. So for example, this one here, I believe I rotated it. This one as well, because I thought that would be a great image. If you're looking at holiday lights, usually they're hung up, they're strung up higher. So this would be kind of cute along the top of an image as an overlay. So I am in library. Let me click over to develop mode. I'm going to hit D. And let's see what I did here. Sorry, anytime you happen to touch any of these presets, it's going to adjust the image. So yep, all I did, I imported it. I reduced my highlights, reduced my shadows. Actually, I increased my highlights a little bit, reduced the shadows and the blacks, and I did a little brush stroke. And that's all I did. Oh, here's what I did. So this was the original, and it had this weird thing at the bottom. I don't know that that's going to help me in an image. Maybe it could, but I'd rather just add another one of these and flip it so this is along the bottom. So I want to get rid of that. So I increased my highlights. You see what I did there? Increased my highlights, lowered my shadows, lowered my blacks, got rid of that, and then I exported it. So that's all I did here. If this is too warm, again, you can go to your temp and tint sliders, and you can say, you know what, that's a little too yellow for me. So I can make that a little lighter. I kind of like how, so you don't want it like that, obviously, or maybe you do. Maybe that's what you want to do. But I kind of think that looks good to me. Maybe a little less, or I could actually just desaturate as well. And it'll just take a little bit of the edge off of that kind of glowing neon-y type of orange here. So that's all I would do for this one.